Black Op Radio presents 50 Reasons for 50 Years. Why the Warren Commission may be the greatest fraud perpetrated on the American public. Now your host, Len Osanek.
Lee Oswald's been arrested. He's taken to the Dallas Police Headquarters. He's being interrogated by Dallas detectives. He's got two pieces of contrary ID, Alec Heidel, Lee Oswald. While they're trying to figure out exactly who they have in custody, J. Edgar Hoover's already on the phone to Bobby Kennedy saying, "We have our man in Dallas." Author, researcher, Jim Mars explains just how it is that Lee Oswald came to be under suspicion so quickly.
This is Jim Mars, author of Crossfire, The Plot to Kill Kennedy. How did they know to go after Lee Harvey Oswald? Like so much else in this case, it seems pat on the surface, but once you dig into it, there's too many questions here. Officially, the story is less than 10 minutes after the shooting, the police were putting out a broadcast saying, be on the lookout for a slender white male, about 165 pounds, 5 foot 10 inches, in his early 30s. Here's the question, where did that come from? And the answer is, nobody freaking knows. A cop called in and said some bystander had given him this description. This actually didn't match Oswald, who was lighter than that, shorter than that, and younger than that. Then we get the story that they held a head count at the Texas School Book Depository, and Oswald was the only one missing. This was a guy we needed to go after. But you'll find that that falls apart, too. At the time of the shooting, most of the people in the book depository were outside. They all went outside to look at the president going by. And then when the shooting happened, some of them were in shock, some of them stumbled around, some of them went back in the building and got caught when they sealed the building off, which was not for 15, 20 minutes or more after the shooting. And some of them were outside and could not get back inside. So apparently there really was a head count taken about 1 o'clock. The assassination happened at 12:30. But there was all kinds of people missing. So about 2 o'clock, they held another head count, and by this time, they had counted for everybody except Lee Harvey Oswald. But by that time, he was already in custody. How did they know to go after him? Lieutenant Jack Rebel, who was the police intelligence officer of the Dallas Police, has said publicly that he rode back from Dealey Plaza to the Dallas Police Station with a military intelligence agent, an agent from the Office of Naval Intelligence. And Oswald was a Marine, which is a department under the Navy. Lieutenant Rebel goes back to police headquarters and types up a list of the employees of the Texas School Book Depository. Heading his list is Harvey Lee Oswald of 605 Elsbeth. Oswald had never lived at 605 Elsbeth, but he had lived at 602 Elsbeth back in the fall of 1962. But this information was nowhere on any of his employment forms at the Texas School Book Depository. So where did this information come from? At the time of the House Select Committee on Assassinations, a Colonel Robert Jones of Army Intelligence testified that he had operatives in Dallas who told him that a suspect had been arrested, and his name was Alex James Heidel. He went and checked Army Intelligence files and found out that there was a military intelligence file on an Alex James Heidel, and it cross-indexed to Harvey Lee Oswald of 605 Elsbeth. The very same two mistakes that we find on Rebel's typed list from the Dallas Police Department that was typed up about an hour or so after the assassination. This tells us U.S. military intelligence tipped off the Dallas police as to who the suspect was in the assassination of President John F. Kennedy. This is only one of several incidents involving military intelligence, which has rarely been looked at as a suspect in the assassination.
Oswald was pulled screaming and shouting from the Texas Theater by officers who had gone there on a tip that Oswald was there. He brandished a pistol which officers took away from him after a struggle. Oswald was quoted as saying, "It's all over now."
When Captain Fritz, based on the second and final head count at the book depository, he was telling his detectives, I think we need to go out and find this Lee Harvey Oswald. And one of them said, well, that's funny because he's sitting right there in the office, because he's the one they brought in from the Texas Theater. It was just phenomenal police work. According to FBI documents that were released to the public in the 1980s, less than 2 hours after the shooting, J. Edgar Hoover calls Attorney General Robert Kennedy and says, "We have our man in Dallas. It's Lee Harvey Oswald. He's an ex-Marine. He defected to Russia. He's a mean-spirited individual in the category of a nut." He's already pushing the lone nut theory less than 2 hours after the shooting to Attorney General Robert Kennedy. Now, why is this important? Well, because Oswald was arrested in the Texas Theater. Put him in a car, and they drove him downtown to the police station. And so, less than 2 hours after the shooting, he's just arrived at the police station. And the police find that he has two sets of identification on him. One says he's Lee Harvey Oswald. The other says he's Alex James Heidel. And they're saying, well, which one are you? And he's being uncooperative. He said, well, you're the cops. You figure it out. So at a time when the authorities in Dallas weren't even sure of who they had under arrest, Hoover is on the phone in Washington talking to Bobby Kennedy and has the whole lone nut scenario worked out along with Oswald's background.
In Dallas, the prime suspect still is being questioned. He is 24-year-old Lee Oswald of Dallas, a former Marine who spent some time in Russia, who at one time had applied for Soviet citizenship. He has been associated with the Fair Play for Cuba Committee.
Stay tuned for the next installment as we expose week after week 50 lies the Warren Commission would like you to believe.